Thanks for staying tuned. We'll try now Don Okereke for a third and hopefully successful time. Uh, Mr. Okereke, thank you for staying tuned and for joining us. Mr. Okereke is a security analyst and he joins us via the phone, I understand, this time. Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Very good. My first question was that given the negotiations going on that were going on in Istanbul, Turkey, which are to resume again tomorrow, and the various proposals on the table on one side, and then you have the situation on the ground on the other, where there's now even more intense fighting than there was before the peace talks started. Do you think it is possible that these peace talks would have some concrete results?
Well, I think there's a glimmer of hope, but you can never rule out the fact that the Russians are playing some kind of mind games. From all indications, the United States intelligence authorities are warning that Russia is actually repositioning and not withdrawing. So I suspect the continuation of attacks is also a way of putting the Ukrainians.
Given that position on the ground now, the maneuvering that you're talking about, the reports say that the Russians are massing around places like Kharkiv and the areas in the east, but that there's heavy fighting going on in Kiev. What do you think is the objective of this?
Like I said earlier, I think it's to put pressure on the Ukrainians and also maybe to re-strategize. It looks like Putin is hell-bent on achieving whatever objective that he has in mind. But after more than 30 days of fighting, it looks like what he called a special military operation has morphed into a full-blown war, and maybe they will likely be looking for an exit strategy.
Would you say that it could help to end this more quickly if perhaps those who are supporting Ukraine, like the United States, NATO, the EU, and others, actually put what President Zelensky has been begging for, a no-fly zone and boots on the ground there?
Well, I think a no-fly zone is tantamount to a declaration of war. You have to actually have the capability to enforce a no-fly zone. And I think that will lead to a declaration of war between NATO countries and Russia. And I think that is why NATO countries led by the United States and its European allies are careful not to heed to the demands of the president of Ukraine, Zelensky.
If that is the situation, then what is to happen? Because from everything you've said, if the Russians are determined to achieve the objective, even though just like my earlier guest, Ambassador Keshi, you also say that whatever that objective is, if a no-fly zone can be imposed, if boots can be put on the ground, and there's a sort of stalemate developing, what is the way out of this?
Well, the way out of it is that I think common sense dictates that Russia should pull out of Ukraine, but unfortunately, that is not playing out now. And like I said earlier, from all indications, the war in Ukraine will not end anytime soon, even though they may be able to reach some agreement and all that. So I think maybe with the passage of time, the sanctions on Russia will begin to take its toll. Because they are being stifled of funds and all of that. And I think the soldiers also are getting fatigued, some of them don't even know why they are fighting, So I think with passage of time, there will be some modicum of understanding, and then maybe there will be an exit strategy for Russians to pull out of Ukraine.
A lot of weapons are involved in this. The Russians, of course, are fighting and they're bringing in weapons across the border into Ukraine. And then the Ukrainians themselves are at the receiving end of quite a lot of weapons from the Western allies and the United States. but no one is monitoring exactly to whom these weapons are being given and where they are going. So even if a peace is eventually established, there's going to be even more crisis down the road.
Yes, yes, definitely. More often than not, the end of war somewhere, like we witnessed, between Libya, what played out in Libya, and how the weapons found its way into Nigeria, and also kind of causing the insurgency that we have in the northeast. That will likely also be the trend in Russia or in Ukraine. There's going to be a lot of proliferation of weapons and all of that. So I think the West have to brace up for a way of tracking how these or where these weapons go into.
My final question to you will be about what is going on in the other parts, in the other countries that may be in the long run affected. I remember that when this conflict started, Russia issued a warning to Finland, to Denmark, about the same issue that has led to this conflict in Ukraine, which is that they must not think about joining NATO. Do you see that playing any role in how this will end?
Well, I don't see those countries being deterred by Russian threats. I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, why are these countries so hell-bent on joining NATO? I think it's also for their own self-preservation and protection. If they believe Russia is not a threat, then most of them will not be angling to join NATO. And if we may also ask, there are also a couple of countries that border Russia that are already members of NATO. Why is Russia not attacking them? I think these are some of the issues we need to ask ourselves. So if you feel threatened, the likely thing for you to do is to embrace or look for succor or for support elsewhere. I think that is what is playing out between these countries and Russia. They don't feel comfortable with Russia. They've seen how Russia is treating Ukraine, and they will likely increase their distance to join NATO. Finland has already said so, and a couple of other countries have also indicated interest to join NATO.
Indeed, these are interesting times, which we'll have to keep watching carefully. Mr. Don Okereke, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.